G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire Podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan that hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, The Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting.
And we're live.
We are live.
There we go. It's always got that pause.
Well, that one, that just happened there.
It goes dark, and I think, oh, is it going to work or not? And then it works every time. So, gents, big news. Rob from Athena Spatial has stepped up to the plate and is offering if I get this right, basically a custom map of either a state forest or a private property that you hunt as part of our, I don't even know, what do we call the competition? The one where, you just send us the picture of the animal that you've hunted this successfully this year? That one.
I don't think we gave it a name.
We didn't give it a name. I think that'll do
The Christmas competition. Let's call it the Christmas competition. The Christmas competition. So if you have entered the Christmas competition, which is running on our Facebook page at the moment, or you're thinking about entering the Christmas competition that's running on our Facebook page at the moment, you already know that Outdoor Edge, I'm going to try and get this right, the Outdoor Edge, what is it? Wild Pack 8-piece meat processing kit is up for grabs. Well,
that's the one.
That's the one. Now up for grabs as well is from Rob from Athena Spatial, is a custom map of either a state forest or a private property that you hunt using the Avenza system. Is that correct?
Yeah, so he's a geospatial expert, which means that he can create a map of an area that you want. And we used them when we went on our slam trip, and we used them when we went on our recent Operation
Venison.
And it was just a game changer, having a map of the property that was, clearly defined boundaries. So often you go to some of these places, especially if you pay for a block and you've never been there before, and you book it through, an online hunting booking agent. You show up. Sometimes the owner's there, sometimes he's not. You've got some piece of paper that's not even laminated. It's in a plastic bag and it's about 10 years old and it's wet. And it's got random sketches of boundaries, and I've seen it time and time again. You don't get clear boundaries, and we showed up at one hunt recently, and the neighbour saw us coming in, and he came paid us a visit, and he wasn't real happy that there were people around because the last hunters that had been there jumped the fence, whether they knew or they didn't know. They just got that wrong, and that annoys a lot of people. So Rob's got this fantastic service where you can give him the address and he can create those maps that you load up into Avenza. And most of us at State Forest Hunt know about Avenza. If you don't know about it, it's a free app. Go and download it, and you can upload these maps to it, and it tracks you like a GPS. Little marker shows where you are, and as long as you're on the property, it'll show you exactly where you are, which is just fantastic.
Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that Rob did for us was he was able to give us some overlays to the map. So he was able to point out all the water sources on the block, and he was able to color code the map to show you wherever you were standing, how many water sources you might be able to see at one point in time. So if you're in the grey area, you could see one or none. And if you were in the red area, you could see 2 water sources. And if you were in the blue area, you could see 3 different water sources from that point. So you knew where to go to be able to watch the water if that's where, if that's the type of hunting you're doing, which I thought was good. And the other one that he gave us was it was another overlay that showed you at any point in time when you were in shooting, visible shooting range of buildings or or homes or things like that. just so that you knew if I was standing in this area, if I'm shooting at an animal. We all say that we've got the background sorted out. We know exactly where our shot placement's going and what the backdrop looks like. But if you get that wrong, he shows you where some of those danger spots might be, which I thought was quite a nice overlay. Not that I used that one specifically, but I think the service is excellent. So you can get those overlays. You can already get the maps for State Forest. You get those from DPI, but he can give you enhanced versions of them. Which,
it's a requirement to have the maps for State Forest.
State Forest. Yep. But Rob can give you an enhanced version of that with water sources and visibility and things like that. So anyway, he's offered it up. I think it's a fantastic gift. So thanks very much, Rob, for your generosity, and we're going to give that away to somebody somehow. Mark?
And it's going to be an extra, so it's not like you win the lot. That's two. So there's 2 chances to win now.
Same competition, is it?
Same competition, 2 chances to win.
Stakes are high.
That's right. Get in there. If you don't get the first prize, which is the Outdoor Edge, you've got a chance for the Avenza mapping system.
Excellent. All right. And what do you got to do to win? You've got to send your hunting photo in with a bit of a story. Is that what it was? You got to like, subscribe.
Subscribe, and post a photo.
5 things. So 1, you got to post. You got to send us your photo. 2, you got to give us some information about the photo. 3, you've got to like our Facebook page. You've got to follow our Facebook page, and you've got to share the post. That will have your photo and your details in.
Oh, so they send us the photo,
or they can drop it in.
Well, they can post it on
Dave Willie just dropped his straight in. He just went, that's it.
Dave Willie.
He just went bang. Okay. I just went, look, there's a new one there. I didn't even know. He just dropped it straight in. But most polite people, they send you this thing with a night like, hey, look, really love your Facebook page or stuff. Here's my photo. Here's a story. Here's just a bit. So that's it. There is that option. You can just do that. And in fact, some people have been so kind as that they've sent me the share. They said, here, look, I've shared it. So, but yeah, I'm just jumping online now, and you just
the technicalities that'll get you in there. You get all of those things right with all that detail, and you've got
you're in a good shot, aren't you?
You are.
You'll beat Dave.
That's it. You can beat Dave. And it's pinned. It's pinned. Where is it? There it is. There. Let's have a look. Let's see who's on there at the moment. Come on.
Suspense is killing me, mate.
It is. It's killing me too. I can't even find it. So that's not one.
While he's waiting for that, there are more giveaways coming. We're not going to tell you what they are.
We don't hear that. We don't hear the voice.
There's some pretty cool giveaways coming that we'll mention shortly. Not this episode, but there's some very, very good stuff coming that you're going to be interested. So keep shooting.
Very cool
found
prizes.
And there's some really nice ones. In fact, there is, what's his name? So there's Dave. He just dropped his in. Very good. Good write up from Chris Donahue. I suppose it's Antonio Rosso has got one when it's him as a kid. I thought it was really good. Shit, with a rabbit.
Cool.
So yeah, keep it going, guys. There's prizes to be won.
Some awesome prizes.
Yeah. Okay. What are we talking about tonight?
I don't know.
You either. Jono. No, I'll lead away. There was a question that was posted to us a little while ago, which we thought was a really good question to ask. And it was...
Oh, I better pay attention then.
Yeah, well, it came about because this fellow had been watching our podcast for quite some time, following what we do, where we go, and the type of gear we use. And he mentioned that we were lucky enough to be using some pretty nice gear. We've got some good partnerships that support us with the podcast. So we've been playing around with different equipment over the year, and we're very lucky to do that. But just because we use that type of equipment doesn't mean that you that you have to, and that there are lots of options out there. So this question that was positioned to us was, what do you actually need to be able to get hunting? What do you need to start hunting without having to invest crazy amounts of money on some of the equipment that we use and some of the other people that you might see on the socials? So the question's out. Mark, we'll let you take it away. Hunting on a budget, I guess, or for the new person that's trying to get into it that may not want to invest a whole lot of coin into it straight away while they find their feet and get to figure out whether they like it or not. Those that do have a tight budget at home, there's plenty of people out there. Where do they start? Where do they go? How do they go about it on a budget?
You just asked like
1,000 questions.
6 significantly important questions. So before we jump into that, there was a question about finding out if you like it or not. I think that's a really important question.
If what?
You find out if you like it or not. That's actually a really important question.
I thought you were being smart and said you've got to find out whether you like lycra or not.
No, not like it. Like it. Well,
what if you're a mammal?
Look, I've got to the age where if you tell me it's 2 + 2 is 5, I'll say okay. Carry on. So I don't care if you like lycra or not.
Okay, you've got to find out if you like it or not.
That's right.
You enjoy it.
So, and I think that raises a really interesting question. So I've had people over the years who've gone, oh, look, this looks really cool, or my mate does what you do, or da-da-da-da-da, can I come along? And, one of the things that I say to them is that, are you comfortable with things being killed? That's what I say.
Valid question.
Are you really comfortable with things? And they'll go, oh, I'm not sure. And I go, well, then you don't want to find out after the fact. You need to have that right in your head. It's not like fishing. If you kind of get upset, you can throw the fish back and you can pretend it lives, and it finds Nemo and everyone's happy. That's right. If it goes belly up, just don't look, and everything like that. But you don't do that when you shoot something. That doesn't happen. So I think that's a really important thing. So if you are comfortable with that, I think is the starting point. So the really easy answer is you can do this as cheaply as, you can do this really, really cheaply. So for me, I started out in my teens. I didn't have any access to firearms. Except for an air rifle. I had an air rifle when I was a kid. So I went to the range. So when I was able to drive myself, so when I had enough money to have a car and a job to finance my car, I drove to the range and I hired gear, and that's where it all started. Okay. And I realized that, I knew that I wanted to hunt. So I would hunt basically out of the back of a Tirana, because that's what I had. And I bought I bought the rifles I could afford, and I shot the ammo that I could afford, and I wore the clothes that I had on my back, basically. So I hunted in jeans and T-shirts and boots. I always had pretty good boots, because as soon as I could afford good boots, I bought good boots, because I always did lots of hiking and stuff like that. So I had good boots, and I had hiking gear, because that's kind of what I was into. So I had that. But it wasn't like, I didn't have like, KUIU or MSR hiking gear. I had basically, Camp Mart hiking gear, but I had hiking gear. So the entry point was pretty easy for me, and I literally drove. It was expensive in a way, because I had to drive to Emerald, but once I got there, I was allowed onto a property for free. And
so when you say you
live out the back, I live out the back. Yeah, go
you were
on.
hunting. I was trying to say, when you say you got into hunting, a lot of people get into hunting by going and bowling a few bunnies over the back paddock, something like that. You're literally starting hunting by driving 8 hours to get there
with a 30-30. And a pair of boots, jeans, t-shirt, and I don't know the name of them, but disposal stores used to when there was disposal stores, that those bags they used to sell that made from that really, really kind of like balled cotton. I don't know what they actually call that stuff. They're really, really super heavy backpacks and soft bags they used to make. I literally had one of them, and I had a box of 30-30 in it and a knife. And the first knife I had was a kitchen knife, a small one.
Sharpened?
Yeah. I can sharpen a knife, but it's a kitchen knife. So one of the first knives I bought for hunting was a buck Vanguard, and I still have it. I've butchered it 4 or 5 times because I'll hollow grind it and then I won't, and I do it so the blade, it's like one of those meatwork knives where it's a slither of meat. But that was it. So I had a 30-30. The reason I had a 30-30 was I was a lefty, so I couldn't afford bolt-action rifles because there was no real left bolt-action rifles, and what there was really expensive. I wanted to be a cowboy, so I had a 30-30, and I wasn't smart enough to start with a 22, so I went straight to a 30-30, so that was it. And that's where I started, and I shot like that for a number of years, and I kind of bought different guns and shotguns and all sorts of things, but basically my kit was pretty primitive. And so the single biggest cost for me was travel. Okay? That was the single biggest cost for me. I was travel.
And when you say hunting, you say hunting, what were you chasing?
I basically would drive to this property, Emerald, and I'd start walking until I saw something worth shooting. And that was roos, pigs, dogs, whole lot. But basically,
so you were out there
mostly pigs.
Out there to shoot stuff, not bringing the meat home.
No, there was no concept of
pure shooting. Yeah.
There's no concept of meat processing. So basically, it was armed bushwalking.
Didn't really need much of a knife. Had your rifle.
That's it.
No game bag. None of that stuff wasn't required.
That's it. And I literally, I had a leather belt that didn't go through my jeans, like a second leather belt, and I had a army water bottle on that belt. So, and I hunted like that for a lot of years. And when I did spend money, I spent money on either rifles, knives, boots. Were the 3 things I spent money on. And then I started buying other. So I bought other, because I said I always had some nice hiking gear. So I had like a good compass and a reasonable quality sleeping bag and I had thermarest and stuff like that. So that stuff was always, because I used to do hike racing and stuff like that. So I had that kind of stuff covered. But my shooting gear, I didn't have binoculars for donkey's years. I didn't have a scope for donkey's years because I shot lever actions. And I could only, and there was 2 types of lever actions. There was Winchester, which were top eject, so you couldn't put a scope on it. And rich guys had Marlins that had side eject. So
rich guys.
Yeah, that's it.
John?
That's right. So that's where it started, and that carried right up through to Port Arthur. And then I had a 10-year hiatus because of Port Arthur, so I didn't shoot anything for 10 years. And then when I got back in it in 2007, so about 10 years later, I had money in my pocket. I had a different job, I was a professional, and I was living near the city, and I was driving a little sports car, and I had coin in my pocket, and I started buying nice stuff. But even when I look at the photo, but what happened was I had no access. So now I had the opposite. I had coin, but no access. So I joined ADA, and I bought my first left-hand bolt-action rifle, which I still own. Tikka, and that's one of the reasons why I like Tikka so much, because they brought out a good range of left-hand bolt-action rifles. Bought a Tikka. I bought a scope. That rifle was a scope on it. Woo. And when I was in the ADA, I learned about the R license. So I was doing that thing with the ADA where I was paying to hunt up in the blocks in Brisbane Valley through what they call the QDMG. and I discovered this thing called this R license by walking, because I basically almost had like a place to sleep, almost had like a permanent, chair in Queensland Gun Exchange. I was in there so often when they were still in the valley. And
in the valley?
Yeah. Queensland Gun Exchange used to be in the valley.
Whereabouts in the valley?
On Ann Street, on the main drag.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I used to go in there on Saturday morning after a night on the piss. Me and Tim would head straight into Queensland Gun Exchange, still reeking of grog, and just go, give me.
Playing with guns.
Yeah.
And then we go to the range and just shoot all day. So, but when I looked at this stuff, with the R license, that got me hunting. So again, that was a very, again, it was a pretty cheap entry point, licensing and stuff like that. Once that costs, and again, the cost really came down to travel. So, we were traveling into Severn. So I've hunted Severn, I don't know how many times, but Severn was it was a 4-hour run one way. So 8 hours worth of fuel. So again, relatively cheap hunting. And I've got all my photos, because this time in 2000, before that I never carried a camera. I've always carried a camera since. And I look back at all those old photos, and I reckon we'll post some of them up. I'm wearing army disposal gear. I'm wearing, so when I shot my first goat in Pilliga, I'm wearing a Ridgeline t-shirt, a pair of brown shorts. I still got my army water bottle on my belt, still there. And I got a Tikka rifle. And I got gaiters on and a pair of old boots when I shot the first fallow in Nundle. I've got army disposal pants. I got some kind of, probably Stony Creek fleece, and an army disposal vest on. And when I shot my first goats in Severn, I'm wearing almost exactly the same outfit. The only hunting clothes are that fleece and a blaze orange Remington cap. So even then, I was still doing it pretty cheap.
You didn't progress too far to becoming the cowboy that you thought you were going to be.
I didn't. I become the cowboy in other ways. I've got two pairs of
same frame as Woody.
I got area boots and area jeans. I become a different kind of cowboy.
A Cobra.
No, I never worn a Cobra. No, I never worn. No, I look like a roofing guy with a big hat. No, I got the boots and all that stuff. But yeah, so the entry points were pretty easy in terms of cost for me, and that's because when I started, I was a second year apprentice, and I was a second year apprentice when no one, your mates who were on the dole used to laugh at you because they made more money than your apprentice. That kind of. That's when I was a second year apprentice, when it was like, you literally got. I think I got in second year. I think I got to 3 figures for pay. I cleared $102 a week. For that, in the first year apprentice, I was in the high 90s. I was 97 or something. So never
that's
had
relative though. What was the rifle worth?
Yeah.
Well, no, it wasn't relative because I used to drive a V8 Tirana, so it was like I knew exactly
Fuel
how
was
much.
cheap too.
Everything else was cheap.
I knew that when I started on I knew where the needle had to be on Sunday night, so I could drive to work for the next one.
The same. When I got paid, I got paid cash in a little envelope.
Yep.
The little place where I worked, and it was counted down to the coins how much I got paid that week, and I knew that I could pay my mum back the car loan because she bought the car when I started work. I could pay my mum back the instalment for the car loan. I could pay my week's board. I could fuel the car up, which was enough to get me to work and back and to the city to chase girls on the weekend. I could buy a 50-gram pack of tobacco, and I could buy a carton of beers. And that was paid. Done. I was finished. And I was lucky to have board because that covered my lunch for work for the rest of the week. And then I'd do it all over again. That was long.
I either went for a beer or I went out looking for girls on Saturday night, or I had a beer on Friday night, but I couldn't afford to do both.
Not at all.
We drink tonight. Okay, that's it. So I'm watching TV. I'm watching TV on Saturday night. That's it. Trana sitting in the driveway.
Let's flick to Jono. What was the baseline kit for you when you got into hunting?
Well, for me, so I got into hunting as a teenager, late teen. We've spoken about it on the podcast before. So my mate Rory at school, he came from a hunting family, and he got me interested in hunting. I didn't go on my first hunt until I was 18. Why? Because I had my first car, which was given to me by my mother. I didn't have to buy it. I was very lucky, which was a very small single cab ute, like a jambuck type style ute that you would get here in Australia. Was one of those. And the first rifle I ever had wasn't mine. It actually belonged to a family friend who was a doctor who had a lot of money, and he kind of loaned me my first rifle. So he had a big. I remember, as I said, he was a doctor. He was very wealthy. He had a huge walk-in gun room, which I'd never seen before. And I went round to his house, and I walked into this room, and it was just wall-to-wall rifles. And he was
like, "A walk-in gun room."
Oh, just not everyone's got one, mate, like you.
Yeah, awesome. Sorry, Karen.
But the first rifle I ever got to use was a Bruno, so the precursor to CZ was the original Bruno, and it was a 270. I'd never shot a rifle before, apart from a Daisy air rifle that my neighbour had, or someone from two houses down the road that we used to be allowed to go and shoot, and I'd shoot the occasional dove. But I'd never known a rifle before, and the rules in South Africa back then were a little bit loose. You were allowed to loan a rifle to a unlicensed person as long as they were over the age of 18 and you had a letter of permission. So he would write a handwritten letter saying, "I hereby allow Jonathan Steele to use this rifle, and I could keep it at home." I had a safe. I actually went to the local Costco type store and bought a gun safe for as little money as possible, but I could borrow that. I didn't have to buy it. And I went shooting. I'd never shot a rifle before. And first shot, I got a nice big Weatherby on the top of the eye, and the eyebrows with the 270. Yeah.
With that, yeah.
But that was the first rifle, so I didn't have to buy it. It was loaned to me. I was very fortunate. You know, the licensing laws at the time allowed you to borrow a rifle. From a clothing perspective, Disposal's Army Surplus store was my friend. I went down there, found a big jacket, found some clothes. Literally, you would rummage through some bins trying to find something that would fit you. And that was the first hunting clothes that I bought. I invested in a good pair of boots. For me, boots has always been important because of my feet. So I bought a good pair of boots. I think my mother bought me my first pair of boots. I think they were a pair of High-Tex hiking boots. But otherwise clothing was Army Disposable. With the Army Disposables, should I say. That was my first hunting clothes. I remember going to a local factory seconds outlet store where they sold the sort of reject clothing from the hiking equipment. So it was like an army type green, and it was all cheap. It all had a hole in the sleeve or had a misprint or something like that. That was the first clothes I bought. It wasn't, they were seconds, they were rejects. But it served a purpose for me. It was cheap. I didn't have much money. From a hunting perspective, South Africa is slightly different. It's all private land. It's all half-fenced. Well, most of it's half-fenced stuff. So we would shop looking around, and we'd buy the local hunting magazine every month that comes out. And just before hunting season, at the back, they would have all the hunting opportunities. You could go through there, and all the farmers would list what was available to hunt. And we would shop by price. What was the best bang for buck, basically? What's the biggest animal we could get? What's the animal that's going to yield us the most meat? Because that's what we're hunting for, was meat. So we would look through that, ring up the farmers, see what availability they've got, and then head out and go and shoot what we could. It was as cheap as possible. I think the first animal I shot would have cost me $40, which when I was 18, 19 years old was a lot of money, but it yielded me so much meat. And as you know, South Africans love their biltong. So I remember the first night on the first hunt I ever did, sitting in there cutting up meat, and I was hooked. That was me set for life. once I started working and I got a little bit of money, I actually, my first rifle I bought was a German Krico 308, which was a secondhand rifle, and it was actually very cheap. I think it cost me probably about $200. Probably not even that much. And the reason why it was so cheap is the previous owner had actually on the side of the stock had engraved his initials, and I'll use like J and a heart and an S. He had actually engraved his initials and loved somebody else on the side of the stock, and so it actually engraved it into the wood, and it was up there for sale in the gun shop, and it was so cheap. And I said, could you grind that out? Sort of take a cut out that piece of wood and replace it. And he said, yep, I'll do that for you if you buy it. So I bought that, and it cost me nothing. That was the first rifle I ever bought. And the only reason I got it so cheap was because someone had actually scratched in the initials of, like someone does on a tree in the park or something like that, like J loves S or whatever. He had actually done that on the side of the rifle. Why he decided to do that, I don't know. But it got me a cheap rifle. And, I still own that rifle to this day, which is probably coming up to 27 years later. I still own that rifle. It's sitting in South Africa. Will I ever hunt with it again? I hope so. It's sitting with my best mate Rory, the guy who introduced me to hunting. It's in his safe. And when I went back in 2018, I hunted with it because it's the first rifle I ever owned. So for me, it's special.
It's awesome. My story's a bit more tragic and probably a little bit more embarrassing. No, I being brought up in New Zealand, our gun laws over there were either loose or I didn't know about them, so I didn't care. That's sort of how it was. Most kids I knew had slug guns. Growing up, we all had slug guns, and I had this really awesome collapsible double-sprung slug gun that was just deadly. You could shoot, and because in New Zealand possums were feral, or pests, you could go and shoot possums out of trees, and the slug gun could shoot a possum through a piece of corrugated iron, and it would knock it over. It was a pretty powerful piece of gear. And as kids do, we modified that thing and got an extra powerful spring put in it, and yeah, it was a bit of fun to start with. But I idolized my uncle. I had one uncle on my dad's side. He was a military man, and whenever he would come to visit, I'd ask him stories all about this, his life in the military and things like that. And one day he dropped off a full set of pack webbing, ration packs, clothing, all the camouflage netting, like pretty much a full set of kit that he had. He just brought it and dropped it off, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I've got all this stuff that I can now, pretend I'm a soldier. I'm not a cowboy. I'm the soldier boy instead. And I would go up, we had bush up behind us, and I'd put the pack on, and I'd go camping and take my own stuff up there, and I'd wear the webbing and and all the cams, and I'd go up there and make my little hut, and I'd survive overnight, and I'd come back, and I thought it was awesome. But as I got a bit older and I got the slug gun, and I'd then go, wandering the neighbours' paddocks and shooting bunnies and shooting possums, and the bunnies was what did it for me for the meat, because Mum said, well, you should bring it home, bring the bunny home, and we'll cook it. So I did it, and it was beautiful. And then I could go, I could go out on the weekend and I could go and shoot some bunnies and bring them back. And I thought that was just the best thing ever as a young, preteen, pretty much. For me, so I probably had, I'm not going to say it's great gear. It was an Alice pack, from probably Vietnam days, and some old webbing, but it was serviceable and it did a great job and it carried everything I needed to. I remember these packs had these quick release things on them, so if they came under fire, you could just flick a thing on and the whole pack would fall off. Well, that component of my pack was faulty, so I had to walk everywhere hanging on to my pack strap so that it didn't fall off. And I'd be hiking for 6 hours like that through the Kaimai Ranges back home, hanging onto the pack strap so it didn't collapse on me. But that was all pretty good. Boots for me, again, it was Army issue. I'd go down to the surplus store as well. It was one of my favourite shops as a kid whenever we went to the city, and they were called GP boots, general purpose boots. Black leather, terrible for your feet. But, if your feet got used to them, you could go anywhere in those boots, and I just absolutely loved wearing those boots. So I had this terrible pair of GP boots and all of this old Army gear. bit later on, after the slug gun, I was dating a girl in town, and her dad had a 22, and he would let me borrow it and go down to where I was working, where they'd pay me $5 a rabbit, because I worked at a rose nursery, and the rabbits would come down the lanes and chew all the rose buds off. Right, so I could take that, and that would earn me my second carton of beer for the week, which I thought was pretty damn cool. And even when I came back some years later, I ended up joining the military, and I'd come back for Christmas holidays, and I'd go and get my girlfriend's 22, and I'd go down to the rose farm, and I'd shoot for beers. Pretty much that's how it worked. But I spent a lot of time up in the ranges behind home. I was lucky enough to live in an area which was about a 10-kilometre strip of land wide, with the ocean on one side and the mountain range on the other. So we'd either go fishing or we'd go hunting. And I spent so much time up in that bush. Mum would drop me off at the end of a track. I'd stay up there for a week and a half. I'd meet her out at another track. She'd resupply the food. I'd check in. She'd know I was safe, and I'd go back again. Originally wasn't hunting. I was just adventuring with friends. We'd go up there, and the ration pack that came in that Army surplus stuff, I wrote all of the bits down, and every time I wanted to go hunting, I would go and make my own ration pack from the supermarket. And I remember Mum saying it was the cheapest thing I could ever do on a school holiday, because it would only cost me $20 for a week's worth of food, and off I'd go. And I'd be out over here, and she'd be able to do whatever with my siblings. So that's sort of how I got into it. And eventually we started running into pigs and deer and all sorts of things, and it all just sparked my curiosity. But in the early days, I was never lucky enough to have a centerfire rifle. So, we were able to find the deer, but it was actually illegal to take the 22 into the bush because you'd be prosecuted for potentially attempting to shoot native birds, which is a big thing over there. So never really got onto deer as a hunter myself, unless I was with other people. And then eventually I left New Zealand and moved to Australia. And after my hiatus in my early 20s, I eventually picked it back up again. And I've told this story before as well. My first hunting rifle, when I moved to Toowoomba, I went to the open range where the state president of the ADA owned a shop called the Open Range, and I walked in and said, "I want to hunt deer." And he said, "Have I got the gun for you?" No disrespect to Pete, he's a top bloke. Not sure if he got more commission on this one than the other one, but he had the package. It was all worked out perfect, and it was a Remington 700 270, and I've still got that rifle. It sits in my safe. My son will probably get it when he's old enough, but it was a pretty cheap rifle package at the time that suited my budget, because I didn't earn a lot of money, and we were living on some land where I could go ferreling. I could go and knock over some roos, and I could knock over some pigs, but that was pretty much it until I then joined the ADA, and that got me seriously involved with deer, and really haven't looked back since then. But as far as doing it on the cheap, in the early days it was easy. It was all gifted. I used what I had. I serviced what I had, and I borrowed so that I could go and do stuff, much like you were talking about, Jono. When I started up here, I don't think I had Army surplus, but I had a lot of leftover gear from when I was in the military, and that was good enough for me. So I guess the message, from my perspective is, try and get some earthy clothes, earthy tones rather than blues and reds, but use what you got. Just get into it and go and have a stab.
It's interesting. All three of us own the first centerfire we ever bought, basically.
We owned it.
I don't have my 30-30.
You don't have your 30-30?
No.
You still got your Tikka, your left-handed bolt action.
I got what I call my second hunting life. I've still got the Tikka, but I haven't got that 30-30, which is a shame, because it was actually, now that I know a little bit about it, it's a shame that I haven't got it. It was actually, I'm pretty sure it was a 1930s circa 30-30.
Hey, Mark, can you up your volume a bit, mate?
Sure, buddy. Sure. I'll just drop the mic down. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So, I'm pretty sure it was a 1930 circa 30-30. I suppose the other lead into that too is, that's your personal gear, but then there's kind of the bigger gear, which is also a concern for people. Do I need, a four drive? Do I need what kind of hiking gear? Do I need things like that? Again, the entry point doesn't have to be at that high level. If you're going to hunt a state forest, you're probably not likely to hike with a pack on. You're going to be hunting with a pack on, but you're not likely to hike with a pack on. So you're not doing. That's right. You're not backpack hunting. You're not backpack hunting. So you don't need to carry your stuff on your back. And if you don't need to carry your stuff on the back, i.e., you're carrying it in your car, then Camp Mart or whatever it is, or Anaconda or BCF, that level of camping gear will be just fine, if not possibly more comfortable than super lightweight small stuff. So, again, the price point there is very easy to get into. The first pigs I shot in Nundle, didn't shoot him out of, but the vehicle of choice was Tim's Mitsubishi Lancer. We would hunt Nundle in the Lancer, and what we would do is we just drive along Forest Way until we were confident the track that we were going to turn in on that we could get out of. So, yeah, this one looks pretty stable, and we drive in, and then we'd pretty quickly kind of go, okay, here's where we're going to stop. We'd stop, and we'd just get out and walk, and sure enough, we'd find game. So we didn't have, and if we ever carried anything out, we had to carry it back to the car because we could not take the car to it. As I said, the first vehicle we had was the Lancer, and then I got myself a four-wheel drive, but that was a few years into it, so didn't need that outlay to start with as well. And I'm pretty sure that the first few years when we were camping, as in when we were hunting, it was either just straight normal camping gear or it was even less. I remember there was one year at Severn, we were just under a tarp with stretcher beds and sleeping bags and stuff like that. So again, and cooking gear was those cheap, butane cookers and things like that, and eskies. So it's things that most people will have, or at least have access to. So you don't need to go into that gear. I kind of think that shouldn't stop you aspiring to owning nice gear. I mean, I'm a victim maybe of that myself. But I think what you do is as the more experienced you, or more experiences that you have, the better your ideas about what kind of gear really works for you. And so then you start to experiment. You start to go, well, is it that kind of boot? Is this kind of boot? Is it that kind of clothing? Is that, and so on and so forth. But I think you almost need to go through that period where you kind of don't have exactly what you need, because you learn pretty quickly from it.
And I think,
for sure.
I think you then, if you're working on a budget like many of us have, you end up upgrading the things that are going to give you a better opportunity. You're going to upgrade your scope potentially. You might then upgrade your binoculars. Having matching shirt and pants, not going to change much. Doesn't matter. I know a lot of people spend more money on having the latest matching everything so that they're branded to one brand. Sure, if that's your thing, that's fine. But for someone who's starting on a budget, it's really not necessarily, and you can focus your budget on things that are going to help you succeed more.
Yeah, I think that's it. You build your kit around the most important stuff, and then you kind of build out from that. So, and to me, rifles have always been the kind of centerpiece. I say whenever we go away hunting on a trip, I go, if I forgot anything, as long as I haven't forgot the rifle and the bolt and the ammo, the rest I can, I'll get by with everything else.
Yeah, you can walk in jeans if you need to.
That's it. Well, I've got a photo that I was hunting in the Pilliga, and it's got to be only a couple of years old, maybe a bit more, maybe like 2019 or 2018, something like that. I can look it up, but I'm wearing jeans and I'm wearing a Columbia fishing shirt because it's a Pilliga, and that actually makes a lot of sense in that country, So I'm sure you could hunt it as you said, in matching camo, but I'm holding that Tikka rifle with the 30, in 3006. That's the anchor point of that whole hunting trip.
Go. Let's talk about the rifle then. The rifle is the centerpiece, but you can get some damn good, relatively cheap secondhand rifles that are going to shoot straight. They might not be the prettiest. They might be scratched up. That's okay. They're going to get that way anyway, unless you're Jono and you don't take it out when it's raining.
That's only for the special ones.
But there is a lot you can get for your money without having to go and buy brand new fiberglass fluted blah 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 blah. Right?
Yeah. Well, the first rifle I bought was, as I said, that secondhand 308, which had engraved initials into the stock. Did I like what they had done? No, but it met a price point as what I could afford. It was my first rifle, and I could afford it. I couldn't afford anything else. As I said, I had it fixed. It cost me a couple of $100, and this is rands, so it was pretty cheap for a gunsmith just to use a router or something like that to cut it out and stick a piece of wood in. And I still own that rifle. It's scratched up. But it still works. It was cheap, and as I said, I still own it. And I bought a secondhand 22. It was scratched up. It was been through the wars, but it's as accurate as anything. And I love that little 22. And you can spend a little money later down in life. You can have it cerakoted or something like that if the bluing is worn off, which this one is. And one day I might do that. But for me, it gives it a lot of character. And it doesn't have to be a brand new, $5,000, $10,000 rifle just for it to perform as better, if not, than a couple $100 secondhand rifle. You can get some pretty good deals out there.
Yeah,
I mean the kind of the add on to that is that reviewing a number of rifles that I do. What I've seen, especially in rifles that are available in Australia, it's kind of like what happens in fishing. Like Shimano will bring out a reel, and it'll be like their top line reel, and it'll have all their bits and pieces in it, and it'll be like it'll be a many $100 reel. And what happens is over the following years, that technology kind of keeps dropping down, and so eventually you get down to a $100 reel that's pretty spectacular compared to what a $100 reel might have cost a few years ago. And I've seen that trend in rifles too. The number of entry grade rifles that you can buy now that shoot sub MOA or MOA that are often semi customized to start with. Like I was looking at I reviewed a Savage 110 Backcountry. I mean, it's not the cheapest rifle, but it's by no means is it like Seiko price. And, it was fluted. It had the aftermarket stock on it. It was color coded. It was all these kind of things. Shot like a demon. And, the Frankie rifles, they're look like a really, I haven't tried one. I've shot one, but haven't really done any in-depth with them at the moment. They look like a very, very good price point rifle. So, in fact, you can actually buy new now, or very late new, and get some really nice gear for a reasonable price. Of course, where you don't save a lot of money is in optics. We haven't yet figured out how to make glass cheap, or maybe they'll never will, but that's it. So, if we're looking at rifles, when people say, what rifle should I buy, and which is always an awkward question, because there's so many kind of, well, what do you intend to do with it? What's your price point? What, all those kind of things. And so people start espousing their brand. I shoot Remington, buy a Remington type thing. A big question about that often isn't covered off is, what optics should I put on top of it? Because ultimately the optics is the interface between you and the rifle. So so I always say, buy a nice rifle, but if you've got any kind of money left in the tank, spend it on optics.
I mean, for me, having the first rifle that I owned, I bought a Bushnell scope. It was a entry level Bushnell, served me 3 to 9 by 40, I think it was, pretty standard magnification, great scope, worked perfectly. When I moved to the UK, I started hunting, and a 3 to 9 by 40 Bushnell is not going to cut it in the type of hunting you do there, because you're doing stand hunting, you're doing hunting that really, really last light and first light. And I think I told the story on the podcast before, but I was sat in a high seat there in the UK overlooking paddock, and I had a pair of cheap Bushnell binoculars that I bought off eBay, I think it was, and I was there with a guide who's actually a friend of mine, Austin, and he was nudging me saying, in the field, there's deer, and I was putting up these Bushnell binos, and I couldn't see the deer, and he hands me his pair of Swarovski binoculars, and there's 20 deer sitting in the field. So depending on what hunting you're doing should dictate what optics you're going to get. If you're going to be hunting a lot of last light stuff, you really want that quality European optics. Obviously Swarovski's up there, Zeiss, but the Steiner and those sort of optics, they work so well in that last light. For general purpose, you potentially don't need as high quality, but I think you should be investing more in your optics than you should on the rifle. That's my view.
They're making some pretty good scopes these days that have a really dynamic range, don't they? Like this, the Predator 8 is, I can't even remember what it is. It's a 2 to what?
That's the 8. Well, it's an 8, so it's a 2 to 16.
Yeah, like it's quite a broad range. So you can use that for open country and close quarters at 2 power, right? So I think they're making optics with a much bigger range now than they used to. That's the first scope I had. It was the Bushnell 5x15. Not the best idea for close quarter hunting, spot and stalk with a 5 power minimum, but every ex-military guy thinks he's a sniper, and this looked like a really cool scope when I bought it, and I didn't know anything about what I was looking for. Thanks, Pete. But yeah, I think I moved on from that fairly quickly, just because I was looking through the scopes of friends that I was hunting with, and as to your point, Jono, they were seeing stuff that I couldn't, or I was seeing things through my binos that I couldn't pick up through my scope, and that's a real pain in the ass. And the animal's right in front of you, but you can't pick it up. Is no good. So there's a combination there of things that you need to buy. But at the end of it, when we're talking about getting into hunting, anything's better than nothing to start with if you can beg, borrow, and steal. Plenty of stuff that you can buy secondhand to get you going. But to Mark's point, probably go more on the optics than you do, on upgrading the rifle itself to start with.
Another challenge I think happens to a lot of people, and it's because they don't have people to lean on, and where they're getting the information from is that I think what I see a lot, and and there is a reason for going that way if that's what if you're into competition shooting or long range shooting or practical, people are building those rifles that are really, they look cool. There's a fair bit of money invested in them, but their actual practicality of hunting is questionable. So, and that doesn't mean it's a bad rifle. It's just about the application. And I think one of the things you learn by doing is what works in the right application for you. You've got to get to that point where you've got to immerse yourself enough in it where you can actually start to make informed decisions for yourself. And so what I say to people is I'd much rather you start and maybe not get it right the first time and go, okay, well, that didn't work. Okay, so I know now what I need to do, rather than try and get it right the first time by just purchasing stuff and actually end up with all the stuff that doesn't work for you. And that can be from that's rifles and scopes, but that's boots, that's clothing, that's a whole lot of things. You've got to immerse yourself into it and actually find out what works for you, and then start kind of pushing from that point. I've changed setups, changed my mind, I do it constantly, to be honest. I'm always refining. I've just refined my binocular rig, because, I used to have a binocular, rangefinder, radio. That was the rig, and a personal locator beacon. So new binoculars have the rangefinder built in, so don't need to carry a rangefinder. Use the Zoleo, don't need a personal locator beacon. Using the Zoleo and with the phone and the Avenza mapping, don't need the radio and the GPS. So you do refine over time, and then actually, I think what I've done is actually I'm carrying less, more practical stuff. But I think you have to really do go through that and learn that yourself. It's very, very hard to give someone that advice and say, buy this, do that, and so on and so forth.
I mean, everyone's different.
Yeah. It's not only that they're different, it's just that, how the hunt's going to play out for them is different. Those kind of...
Everyone hunts differently.
That's it.
If I was going to give some advice around that, and not everyone is going to agree with this at all, but for those that are getting into hunting, it is much, much cheaper, in my opinion, to get the gadgetry centered around the phone. We've spoken about this before. The Garmin Rhino, it's a great piece of equipment. The handheld, the GPS, it's robust. It's got your two-way radio built into it. It's freaking expensive.
Yeah,
and
about $750 or something like that.
Yeah, so it's a lot of money, and sure, you pay for what you get, but I've not found a Garmin Rhino user, right, that really knows how to use that thing very well. There's so much to it. There's lots of features. There's lots of capability in it. Most people learn the basics. Half the people can't get the radio to bloody work because it's got settings on it that if you don't get them right, it can't talk to a normal radio. It's got in-band security settings or whatever they call it. Can't even remember what it's called, but I know that I was in a scenario at the bottom of the Alps in New Zealand where we needed to radio back up to camp to let them know that we were okay. And I almost think that the Rhino came out of the plastic at that point and hadn't even been tested by a mate that owned it. We just thought you could turn it on, push the button and start talking. It wasn't the case. My point really is everything's converged on the mobile phone to what Mark was talking about before. The GPS is there, the messaging's there with the Zoleo, sort of does away with the radio a bit. There's so much you can do with that, and the apps are free, and the phone you know how to use. Talked about this on a previous podcast. If you're going to go and invest in radios and GPSs and all of that sort of stuff, have a look at what can center around the mobile phone first, because you can probably do most of it there without investing too much and by knowing how to use it. It's important you do.
I think that's a really good point. And the thing is that's only just started to happen too.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I was doing a gear clean out a couple of nights ago, and I've got a Rhino in there, and it's in a pretty good condition. Anyone want to buy a Rhino? Give me a call. I've got one.
Have a look at our pre-blooded page on the website.
That's it.
You'll see it up there shortly.
And in that box with the Rhino is also my personal locator beacon. It's in there. And I pulled the rangefinder out because I'm just going to let the boys play with it. It's a little Nikon. It's a cheap rangefinder, a little Nikon Pro Staff. But these are all things that have basically been superseded by quality equipment that have brought all that together. So, it brings it all together. And as you said, the Rhino or any of the Garmins, they have a massive amount of functionality that you don't even look at. There's the amount of functionality that they have, compared to what for most people, the reason why you're carrying a GPS, especially on public land hunting, is to make sure you're legal. Most people aren't navigating by it most of the time. They'll navigate back to the truck, but while they're hunting, they're not kind of navigating with it. They're looking for game. So you're not using it as a navigation tool. You're using it more as a location tool or a locating tool, and also like a legality tool. Make sure you don't cross any boundaries. Don't make sure you're not in the wrong place, wrong time. No one's hunting and going, oh, okay, I need to go on a bearing this much because the deer are at, that point. You're not
But
doing that.
I
not
certainly
like
do that
hiking.
on the way out.
Yeah, but you might
You know.
kind of go, I want to go to that place. And you might say, okay, I'm going to go that way. But if on the hill up there is you see the Monarch on the Glen, you're not going to go, well, hang on, the bearing says to go that way. You're just going to go, put that in my pocket and you go.
I've used it in more than one occasion to plot my way back to the car. So you've wandered around all day. And I now know I've got 3 Ks to go. And if I go straight, it's going to hurt. I need to go round that and up that, not down that, and around, and I'll get back to where. But again, I won't be using the Garmin to do that. I'll be using Avenza on the phone.
That's right. What you need to do to get home to Brett, would be for a Garmin, like 1% of its functionality and power. You just basically go, you drop your waypoint for your car and just say, go home, basically.
While you're having your break, you can look at the tides and you can do some geocaching. Because there's a geocaching app on the Garmin.
Okay, you can
go and find a cache.
See if there's anyone got a painted rock stashed around you somewhere or something like that. Or you can go through your waypoint, markers and, track managers and maybe rename everything or something like that. But what you're actually using it for, it's the basic GPS would do the same functionality. You just need it for the mapping. So you need to buy a better, higher quality one for mapping. And once you get that on your phone and you're comfortable having it on your phone, then, you kind of supersede that.
But we're talking Garmin GPS. The other thing as well is watch.
Yeah,
I've got a Garmin watch. And when I start a hunt, I use the Hark mode, which tracks my, where I'm going. But when I'm done, I can say, take me back to where I started, and I can say backtrack, or I can say straight line. We used it in the territory. Do you remember that, Ian? You shot your buff. We were running out of daylight, and we at the time we realized we didn't have any head torches with us. Ian did have it in his pack. He didn't actually check, but it was. I remembered I'd forgotten mine, and we needed to get back to the vehicle as quickly as possible. So on the Garmin watch, I just said straight line back to where we started, and it took us back. And all I had to do was look at my watch because it's got a built-in GPS. So yes, I'm not using it for mapping, but if I need to get back to where I started from, I can backtrack, or I can just go straight line. And it got us back to camp before we lost light.
That's generally what most
probably a little bit beyond the how do I start this on a budget. With your
look, these watches, they're not cheap, but we're just saying that you don't need to go out and buy a Garmin Rhino.
Well, that's the thing. I think what it is do you need a GPS? Yes. Can your phone act as a GPS? Yes.
100%.
So you've got one.
Does it cost me any more than me just having the phone?
No. What about if I don't have signal, Avenza maps that the Game Council, DPI New South Wales supply you, don't require you to have signal, so they can run without signal. So there it is. You don't need to buy that price. You don't need to buy that. Do you need to have a personal locator beacon? It's a really good idea that you do. Are there any options? There's plenty of other options. There's things like Zolio, which means that you've got the personal locator beacon and you can text wherever you want to be. So you've got communications. Is there cost involved in that? Of course there is. Is it probably a cheaper option?
If you're an iPhone 14 user, they've got SOS on them now.
So, is it a cheaper option? Yes, it is. So you can actually have the later quality in technology for a cheaper option. So there's ways about smarter around this. Just as much, there is ways to save yourself some coin and actually have really good gear.
So
other things you can't cut the costs on because they're simply that level of quality, but you build up to those things. I mean, boots are an example. You can get a reasonable pair of boots that'll do you in most dry weather conditions, or you can spend lots and lots and lots of money on boots.
And in the territory, we were pretty much wearing, reasonable quality sand shoes. I mean, I was wearing Keens, for example, from the local shop, just so that there were a really lightweight pair of runners almost.
I had a I had a pair of Merrill hiking boots, just basic off the shelf, nothing special, no leather or anything like that, because they were breathable and comfortable, and they served me on. I had no
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah. So we'll bring up the topic that we were raised in the pre-chat. Obviously, with rifles, there's a cost of ownership. If you're getting into this, there's buying the rifle, there's getting the license, there's making sure that you've got storage, there's range time if you don't have access to property, etc., ammunition. So there's an argument to say that an entry level into hunting can be done with a bow. Now, let's not assume that you can go and buy a bow and go hunting straight away, because there's a lot to bow hunting. There's a lot of practice you have to put into it to be proficient, etc. If you go through that process and you're not measuring success as a level of cost, you can get actively hunting for even less. And I've had friends of mine that have said, I love to do what you're doing. I want to come along on your trips, but I live in town. I'm in a block of units. I rent. I'm not allowed a rifle. What do I do? And I said, well, you could get into bow hunting if you're interested, but it takes a lot of commitment and time. So there's that. You don't have to get licenses for those. And you can go and get yourself an R license for under $100, and you're ready to go hunting, within a week.
Yep. Generally, I have noticed that R-license hunters generally end up owning rifles anyway. But
yeah, there is a trend. There is a trend. We're talking about Dave Willey again, aren't we?
I don't know if it's a false economy, but certainly it is. I mean, yeah. I mean, it is a more price conscious option to start with. Most definitely. I mean, you still got to practice with it. You still got to have range time, but you might be able to do that at home. You still got to do. I mean, I've got bows. They're not that cheap, but I mean, yeah, they're cheaper.
Yeah. I mean, you can get some very expensive ones.
Yeah.
I guess it could end up being a rabbit hole, just like rifles could. You're always going to be better and the best and the latest and greatest.
There is a I suppose, a reality here, and it's like anything that you do. And if you wanted to save money, you would not own fishing rods. You would just go straight to the deli and just buy fish. Okay, there it is.
I was wondering when this.
That's what you do. You just go. No, you would just literally do that. You would. I got fishing rods in there that I've got. You just buy fish. If you want to save money, don't go hunting. Go to Woolies. It's going to be cheaper. But if you want to have a life worth living, then go fishing, go hunting, go out. So I think that the cost should never be a prohibitive point. You just got to figure out a way to get around it. And if you think cost is a prohibitive for you, then we just need to figure out how to stop that from being prohibitive. We got to get smart around it. That's what it is, because the activity itself is what you want to do. So and we all are examples, and there's plenty of other examples of where you can get going for very, very cheap. It's about as cheap as you can in most things. So yeah, I kind of get a bit funny when people start to do the cost benefit analysis of hunting. Because I don't need to look at those. If that was a business, someone says, "Here, Mark, I want you to look at this business that's worth buying. It's a hunting business." I just go, "Oh shit! Look at those poor bastards. They must have got nothing." But that's it. So that we know that's the reality. As I said, people think I'm rich because of my gears. I'm not rich. I'm just irresponsible. I'll see something shiny and I'll go buy it.
The comment on Facebook I saw was, you all know the he who dies with the most toys wins comment, but there was another one that someone posted up today, which was something along the lines of buy toys now because you can't get them when you're dead. Something like that.
Yeah,
you may as well enjoy your life while you got it. So
that's it. And ultimately, none of us got into hunting for the cost benefit analysis. We got into hunting because It was an activity that there's no other way we could to achieve what we wanted to achieve without immersing ourselves in it. And I constantly want to promote that to people. Don't look at this as a cheap way of gathering meat.
As you said, it's a lot cheaper from Woolies.
So don't look at this as you're going to actually do something worthwhile, and then there's all these other benefits around it. You know, there's a myriad of benefits around it that to you, to others, but ultimately this is an activity that's going to be beneficial to you in your life. So pursue it and figure out a way to pursue it. But don't let the guy with the matching gear and the matching rifle and the matching pack and matching everything else put you off. Get into it.
Well said.
Definitely.
Okay.
I think we leave it there, Mark.
Quite. Okay. Sure.
That's a good way to end it.
That's some wise words to end a podcast.
Cool.